Welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to look at chipping. The last couple I've done have been on putting. Just like in real golf, the short game is key to putting good scores in. You can drive as well as you like, but if you can't put the ball in the hole or put your chips dead close and put a few of them in the hole, then you're going to be struggling to get the really big scores. I've voiced over all of these clips and I realised my microphone wasn't working very well, so I've kept the video and I'm going over the top of it, just voicing over it. So if it looks as if I'm predicting the future, or if it looks as if I don't know what I'm going to do next, it's probably because I can't remember. But either way, so the first thing we're going to do before we even get onto the course is have a look at how I've allocated my stats. Now the stat allocation, obviously there's 4 different types: power, impact, control and stamina. The key one with regards to chipping, I think, is control. Now, obviously, the higher your control is, the better. You can't go over 100%, but you know, if you're chipping at 90% versus chipping at 100%, and you don't catch it quite on the line, and I think that is the key, then you'll find that your chip isn't as accurate as you want it to be. As far as I'm aware, no matter what your control zone is, if you hit a perfect shot, it'll always go pretty much in the same place. I think there is a little bit of a situation where if you hit the same shot 10 times, it wouldn't always go in exactly the same place 10 times, just a little bit of a random factor thrown in. Excuse me. But in general, if you catch the ball bang on, it's going to go in the right place. However, if you don't catch it bang on the line, so if your impact zone is low and you keep missing the line, then that's where your control zone kicks in, as far as I'm aware. Again, I could be wrong with this, but this is the way I understand it. So really you want that control zone to be as high as possible. Other thing you'll notice, actually, when you look at, I've got 113 stats just sitting there doing nothing. Reason for that is, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know there seems to be a bit of an invisible wall at the moment with regards to driving distance, and I'm getting close to it, and I've kind of spent a bit of time at 42 stats, 42,042. And if I change them, it'll mean relearning quite a lot of stuff. So I'm just keeping those stats in the bank for now. I expect that situation with the invisible driving wall will be resolved sooner rather than later, because it essentially means at the moment people who have reached a certain level in stats aren't going to pursue any more, I wouldn't have thought. So it's in their interest. The makers obviously come to us to correct that. So expect to see 600 plus yard drives soon enough. So on with this video, yes. So you'll see my control zone's at 100%. My impact zone is a little bit under, just to give me that little bit of extra power. Stamina would always be half your power or thereabouts. I think I'm one short of being half there, looking at it. So armed with hopefully some fairly accurate stats, we're going to go around a few different holes, a few different courses, and show you a few different types of chip. Key is, if we can't put it in the hole, we want to put the ball dead, and we'll be seeing some easy ones and some quite tricky ones, some different lies, and some different surfaces that we're going to chip off as well as we go through the video. Hopefully you'll come out of it with a few more strings to your bow with regards to what to do when your short game is required. So here we are on it's actually Sawgrass 9 hole. I was looking for some really benign greens, and you can't get much more benign than this course. So there is nothing happening with regards to the elevation of the ball or the lie of the ball. It's not going to kick left or right. It's on a slight downslope coming back towards us. The pin's above us, and there's a very slight right left break. Again, I'm trying to remember what I did here because I'm voicing over this afterwards. Looking at it, I would expect to go very, very slightly to the right, quite a bit past the hole. You can, with a chip, hit it a lot harder than you might initially think, and in some ways hitting it harder is better. Similar to putting, the harder you hit it, the less it's going to break. But equally, if you hit it too hard, it can bobble over the hole. So you've got to be a little bit careful. But if you hit it to kind of hard enough just to get to the hole, obviously that break's going to have a lot more of an effect, and it means you have to think a lot more about how much it's going to move. So you're always wanting to go a couple of yards, certainly with an uphill putt, at least a couple of yards past the hole. So I think what I'll do on this occasion is aim it probably around about 11.5 to 12 yards for my distance, and I'll use a perfect juice drink. It is important with chipping, you can basically you add a random factor, and if you don't use a perfect drink, then you are letting the game decide really what happens when you contact the ball, and it could kick off to the left, it could kick off to the right. Whereas if you hit a perfect shot, then you are always going to put it in the same place pretty much. Okay, so here we go. I'm going pretty much as I predicted, 11.7 past the pin by the look of it. Very slightly to the right. I've hit it just where I wanted to, and that's nicely in. So it's a very straightforward chip to get us started. So here it's the same hole. I've actually gone past the pin, so very, very similar chip. The break slightly left to right instead of right to left, but it's going to be going downhill. Now you'll notice I'm drawing a line here, because what I'm concerned of here is, because the pin's quite close to us, I want to be pitching it, or it could well be pitching short of the green. So if it hits that bit of fringe, it's going to stop quite abruptly, well, relatively abruptly, and it'll probably not reach the pin. So the important thing to bear in mind here is I want to chip it missing that initial bit of fringe. So I would probably underhit this, or hit it a bit softer than I eventually do end up hitting it, simply because I'm concerned about that bit of fringe. And you can see the break there is going right to left, so if it was to hit that bit of fringe, it might kick over to the left before coming back into the right. But I'm going to hit it in such a way that it's going to go past that, and it's going to land on that bit of green. So it's basically going to come in from the left to right like that. So it's pretty much a straight shot, this one, to be honest, because you can see there's a zero elevation there on the right. However, it looks to me as though it may just be kicking over slightly to the left based on the lines that are moving right to left where my ball is. So I think it's probably going to land slightly left of the hole and then come back in to the right. So let's just see. That's exactly what it did. Very, very slightly left and then very, very slightly right. Net result was in the hole. So here we are on the third hole at Sands. Again, it'll be a fairly common position you'll find yourself in. So with this one, played the tee shot, it's cleared the trees at the front of the green, played a high shot, but it's not quite held the green and trickled off to the back, leaving us a makeable but tricky chip. And making these chips are where is where you turn kind of podiums into wins, or fourth, fifth into podium. So you can see I've circled there R3. So what that means is when we make contact with the ball, it's going to initially be off out to the right a bit. So instead of going straight like that, it's going to be going out there. Not quite as pronounced as that, but you get the idea. So what I'm aiming for here is, you can see towards the hole it's breaking in right to left, but a bit closer to us it's actually breaking left to right. So initially I'd aim round about there where I've moved the marker to. What you'll see though, I think, well, that's the line the ball's going to eventually come in at the hole from. However, what we're also considering is closer to us there we've got that left to right break. So if I was to play it quite soft, then these kind of break lines come into effect, these left to right breaks. So I'm going to try and take those out of the equation by hitting it hard enough to get past those, so it's going to pitch on the left to right part, just where my arrow is there. That's the plan anyway. So that's kind of roughly where I want it to land, and then the ball's going to come in right to left. So that's the plan in theory. Now it's just a case of seeing if I can put that theory into practice. So again, with a perfect zone drink, I'm selecting a chip shot. I'm getting my distance. Again, the reason I probably wouldn't go quite that hard if it wasn't for that little bit of break in front of us that I want to clear. But other than that, it's just a case of catching it, and you'll see, moved over to the right, came back in a bit with a break. That little bit of break in front of us wasn't a factor, and straight in the hole. So here we are on the third at Safari. Again, it's a fairly common position you'll find yourself in. The tee shot for this one lends itself to ending up where you are because as you can see, we're kind of in reverse here, but where my cursor is there is a big bank up to the front of the green, but the green then slopes away down to where we are. So it's very, very difficult to make it over that initial hump at the front, but if you do, then subsequently hold the green and have a birdie putt, or an eagle putt, sorry. It's possible to do, but more often than not, you'll err on the side of caution because you'd rather be where I am now than the other side of the green with a very, very difficult kind of little dink down onto the green trying to hold it again. So what I'm going to do here is demonstrate something which I'm not sure if a lot of people use this method, but I find it quite useful. So initially what I'm going to do is show you a chip shot. Now if we were to look at that 6.9 feet above us, generally you'd say okay, that's going to obviously we need to hit it a bit harder, probably about maybe 3 or 4 yards harder. But what we can see here in front of us, we've got a big bank, so it's the ground's rearing up steeply in front of us. We've got to get over that. So this area here, if I pitch the ball anywhere there, it's going to kind of bounce back towards us or certainly stop very abruptly and not make it very close to the hole at all. So hopefully to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is play a chip shot, and I'm going a full 4 yards past the hole here. If it wasn't for that big hump in front of us, that would be absolutely fine, but hopefully what I'll be able to show you is I've lined it up roughly where I wanted it, and if I hit that shot we'll see, so it's actually caught that bit of fringe and it's come back just as I kind of predicted, because the chip shot is travelling relatively low through the air. So okay, you might think, so what we're going to need to do in this situation is just hit that chip shot harder, not the chip shop, no, the chip shot. So here I am, so I'm putting it a full 2 yards further again, and again I haven't used a perfect drink this time, it's just for a demonstration really. So we can see that has again finished up to 2.7 yards short. Very difficult to control. What you'll then find is if I go further again, so a couple of yards further forward, so I'm essentially going 8 yards past the pin at this point with the chip, and the end result of that is it's gone 1.7 past the hole. That's actually not too bad, but you can sometimes find yourself flying 4 or 5 yards past in that situation. But what I do to try and make that a little bit more controllable and a little bit less random is something which I'll have a couple of shots where I do this actually on this video. I'm actually going to use a flop shot rather than a chip shot. Now a flop shot in this situation works very, very similar to a chip. The idea is this line here, I want to try and get over that, and a flop has a lot more elevation and therefore it's a lot more likely to make it past that initial obstacle. Not sure what all my lines are about there, but I was busy talking about something else at the time. So you'll see me choose flop here. What I'm going to do is actually hit this basically the same distance I hit the original chip. So the first chip I played I hit at 19.2 yards, I think. That was well short. I then hit it 21, which was still short, and 23, which was too hard. Now what you'll see me do here is line up a flop shot very, very similar to where I lined up my original chip, and it's not a huge difference. You'll see it, well, it's hard to see with the naked eye, but you can tell by the way the ball lands that it has flown with more elevation. So here we have it. I'm going I'm actually going 20 past the hole by the look of it, so slightly longer than my original chip. I think you'll see me take a couple of tries at this, getting this line right. That looks about right, and so it's made it over that bank. Still a little bit short, but out of the shots I've played, that's the one that's finished closest to where I wanted it. So again, not an exact science, or it probably is an exact science, but not one that I've deciphered. But I'll often use, in that sort of situation, if there's an obstacle in front of us, I'll often use a flop rather than a chip for these shorter shots. This is the second hole at Waikiki. What I've done here is I've just kind of hit the ball around a few different holes and come up with some interesting chips and just recording the ones that look like they might be useful. So this one, in some ways, it's quite similar actually to the last one we played at Safari. It doesn't look at first glance, but again we've got that bank to go up to negotiate. We've got to get over that. So you can see there, that's where the ball would likely pitch with this shot. Mostly because if you can see on the right hand side, the up down elevation is slightly in the blue, which means it's going to travel a little bit lower than you might expect. But if we do get it over that bank, you'll see with these pretty little visual indicators I'm putting on there, the ball's going to want to roll away. It can quite easily drift off the back and onto the fringe, or maybe even into the bunker at the back there. So 2 things to think about: hitting it hard enough to get over the bank, but hitting it soft enough to hold the green. And the 2 don't always kind of tie in too well with each other. So you'll see that R4 elevation there on the right hand side I've highlighted, and that's blue line there, which is indicating that the ball is going to be lower, of a lower trajectory than if that blue line wasn't there and it was just on green, or if it's gone into the orange, means it's going to travel higher when you first hit it. So that's the reason really why this is a tricky chip. Anything more lofted than that, this would be a lot more straightforward. So we know with that R4 it's going to kick off to the right kind of 0.4 of a square, so obviously that's for every 10 yards travelled, so we're going kind of 2 squares, which would be kind of 0.8, and then a little bit more because we're kind of 25 foot. Now you'll notice this area I'm circling down here, this is where it's likely going to pitch, which means the ball's going to kick over to the right further again. So what you'll see is I'm going to take that into account and aim another full square to the left. So from a line point of view, that's probably about what I want. Now what I'm doing here is I'm hitting it just about pin high. Now, you'll have heard me say before that you want to hit it too hard a lot of the time, or you want to hit it harder. So I have hit it a little bit harder here, but you'll see it's just caught that bank and it's finished. It's still, you know, a fairly regulation birdie putt, but no chance of that going in the hole. Now what you'll see here is I'll play the same shot again, so again a chip shot on a similar line, but I'm going to aim it quite a bit further past the hole. I think I hit it a little bit harder than that. Excuse me. And as we can see, despite the fact it was only very, very slightly harder, that's gone way off the back and into the bunker. So you can see we've got a really tiny margin for error with the chip shot here. So what we can do to make that margin a little bit bigger, and it's not a huge difference, is we can again play the flop shot as we did at Safari on the last hole. So very, very similar trajectory, very, very similar heights and in every way to the chip shot from this sort of range, the flop, but it's just that very slightly higher, just that slight amount higher. So I'm aiming it basically pin high, and the difference between this shot and the very nearly went in and the chip shot, you can see it's actually only just held the green, but it did hold the green, and it also gave us that added chance of the ball actually going in the hole, whereas the shot that ended up in the bunker with a chip also had that chance. It was also flirting with danger, as we saw. So the flop shot, in my opinion, was a better one to play in that situation. Again, this is Safari, the 8th hole this time. I've left my drive well right of the green, which has left us with this tricky chip. Now this is a bit different from the last couple we've looked at. There's no real obstacles to look at. We've got a bit of a bank to go up, but that bank isn't kind of in front of the green. It's, you know, the green itself is banked up towards the hole. So we're not worrying about this kind of getting over anything, but we're certainly worried about hitting it hard enough to actually reach the hole. But once we do reach the hole, if we manage to get up this bit of hill here, we're then thinking about, okay, if we hit it too hard, it's going to go down the other side here, so we can see it goes away from the hole, and all the while it's going left to right. So quite a lot of things to think about with this one. The key is, I think with all the chips, the biggest thing is getting the distance right. But when you've got this big break added into the equation as well, it's quite easy to, you know, if you aim too far right, it's going to fly down that hill and you can end up potentially flirting with a fringe on the right hand side. So with this one I'm aiming about 3 yards past the hole. It is going to go a little bit left. If we see the ball lie, it's going to kick very slightly off to the left, fairly negligible, and that break will certainly counter that quite effectively. So when it hits the green, as soon as it hits the green, it's going to start moving right quite rapidly. but where it does hit the green is on a bit of an upslope, so it's not going to kind of kick on or anything like that. So it's quite important here that I do catch it on the line. I think you'll see me have a few tries at this. I think that looks about right. And you can see it coming way over to the right, and as it happens this time it's gone in the hole. But to be honest, the key here was not that it went in the hole, it was that I got the distance about right, that it was going to leave me with you know, a regulation shot on the next hole. So putting it in is always a bonus, so you should be thinking, right, what do I need to do to put it in, but also where's it going to end up, so that my next shot is A, giving me enough points to what I need, and also making it straightforward to hit the birdie putt. Now this is an interesting one. I actually chose this one to benefit myself as much as anything else. I seem to end up here quite a lot at Rolling Hills. When you start being able to reach from the shorter tees, this green, this is the 7th, the par 5, it gives you an albatross chance, and I always seem to mess up the albatross. So for my benefit, I thought I would put this chip in here. But it's an interesting one because it's very, very heavily downhill. So there's two things to take into account. The fact that the pin is 2.7 feet below us, and also on the right there that I've just circled, it is angled already heavily downhill. So it's not much more than a putt this. It will leave the ground as a chip, but it's going to be very, very low, and it's going to, you know, fly forward very quickly. So as with all, I mean, the downhill chips are interesting, because with a putt it would have you hitting it really slow, and you'd see the angle being something like that, bending over to the right. But with a chip it'll be going a lot quicker, so the break won't have that much effect. So we might not aim it as far left as you might think. If you've ever seen a downhill putt, you know, if I was putting it from that same range, I'd be aiming 4 or 5 squares out to the left, or certainly 2 or 3 with that. It's not a huge break, but enough to worry about with the angle of the downhill slope away from us. So what I'm going to do is aim, just have kind of decided on this line to the left of the hole, and I'm going to chip it at around about there. So the two things we're interested in here is how much break it takes, and how far past the hole it goes. So I got that bang on first time. Let's just have a look. So you can see it trickling down, and it's just missed to the right, to the left of the hole. So that wasn't a bad result. We've got it within perfect approach range, and obviously a tap in eagle. So what I'll show you here is, just out of interest, I'm going to play the same shot again, but this time I'm going to actually play it a little bit shorter. So I'm lining that up exactly the same as I lined up the original chip, but I think you'll see, I'm just showing here actually, this is an interesting one actually. Yeah, so I'm just demonstrating, if I actually hit it as soft as I can, there is kind of an invisible limit on how soft you can hit a chip. So I'm actually hitting this way shorter than my first shot, but have a look at where it actually ends up when I eventually get it short enough. It's quite a job to actually hit this as short as you'd want to. I think I eventually settle on something like that. Yeah. So you'll notice it's actually gone pretty much the same distance, maybe slightly shorter. But the reason that finished so far off to the left was because I didn't use a perfect drink. It didn't catch on the line, and therefore that's put the random factor into play, and you can see the difference there. But yeah, that was just as a demonstration that really, when you start chipping under 4 yards or so, you don't really get any shorter. It'll kind of just do what it's doing. Anywhere between 1 yard and 4 or 5 yards, it'll be pretty much the same. So this is the same shot I originally played. I put it on exactly the same line, but what I've done here is actually hit it a little bit softer. And what you'll see here is, despite the fact it's the same line, the break's taken a bit more, and that's actually gone in. So that's the same principle as we saw with the put-in videos earlier. The harder you hit it, the more it'll be affected by the less it'll be affected by the break. Equally, the softer you hit it, the more the break will take hold, as it did there, turning what was a missed shot the first time into an albatross the second time. Still at Rolling Hills, this is the 8th hole. You would have again seen this on my put-in video, notorious one for the rollover putts. Now this is a bit different because this is a chip, and this one's just to demonstrate how hard you have to hit a chip in this situation. So it's not just the fact that the ball is 2.1 feet above us. If this had been kind of a 30-yard chip, and the ball had been 2.1 feet above us, that's pretty negligible. But when there's only 15 yards between you and the ball, and not just that, the actual elevation doesn't really start until about 5 or 6 yards from the hole. You'll see it's going slightly uphill, and then all of a sudden it's ramped right up. So where the hole is, 14.9 yards away, you can see I kind of put a square on it. That area is a big kind of bank. So what that means is when we chip it, obviously we're going to have to chip it quite a lot harder, but it's going to stop pretty much dead. So anything short of the hole, if it pitches short of the hole, unless it's got to be within a couple of inches for it actually to make it. So it's quite tricky to get the power right for this sort of shot. And again, I don't have any real calculation, just experience from repeatedly missing the same shot. Really, hit it a bit harder, right, that's about right. So I think you'll see me go a full kind of 6 feet past the hole here. I think I'll adjust a bit more than that. Yeah, so that's really 6 feet past. A slight break right to left, but similar to the putt again, because I have I didn't actually select the chip shot, so I've got to do that again. Because I'm going to be hitting it much harder, that break, yes, it's going to have an effect, but it's going to be fairly negligible over that sort of distance when I'm hitting it this hard. So hopefully you'll see, didn't use the perfect drink, but that's gone in. That could quite easily have rolled over if I'd hit it any harder, and if I'd hit it softer, that break would have been much more difficult to negotiate. So that was about right. Tricky shot, that one, so quite pleased that went in. On to Waikiki now. This is the 5th hole, and a very, very common position again to find yourself in. This is to demonstrate chipping out of the rough. Now, if you play a standard rough shot, which is what the game kind of defaults to, the rough shot is quite useful for long kind of sand wedges, approach shots. There's less of a random factor thrown in, less of a penalty than trying to play a normal shot, for example. But trying to control a rough shot for a short chip such as this is very, very difficult. So what you can do in this situation is you can actually play a standard chip shot. Difference being it won't travel as far as it would do if it was on the fringe, the green, or the fairway. So again, hopefully this will demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up just as I would a normal chip shot. So in the first instance, I will look at this imagining that I was playing it off the fairway. So my lineup is exactly the same as it would be for a standard chip shot. So I'm selecting chip shot. I think you'll see me aim it 2 or 3 yards past the pin, obviously off to the left a little bit to take into account that break left to right. What I'm now doing to account for the fact that I'm actually chipping out of the rough, I'm looking at the distance I've got there, and I'm actually dividing that by 3. So 18 yards, as a great mathematician, that tells me that 6 yards is a third of that distance. So I'm calculating a third of the distance that I would hit it if it was a standard shot, and adding that on. So I've added a further 6 yards on to this shot. And we should hopefully see the end result of that. It's going to be putting it pretty close indeed in the hole. So not a bad result from what is a tricky par 4. So still at Waikiki here, not too dissimilar a shot until you have a look at my lie. The lie I've got here is the road, which I'm not sure if it would be particularly accurate. It's kind of black rock, but it's what the game terms as road. You'll also see this at rolling hills if you land, unfortunately, on the wooden surround of one of these bunkers. Again, that's termed by the game as road. So what do you do in this situation? It's something that I've had to ask myself recently because I got stuck on the road a few times. So I thought I should probably work out a way of combating this. So what you'll see in the first instance is if I just play a normal shot here, I'm just demonstrating the effect this lie has on your shot. It's trickling on. It's just about making the front of the green. Certainly no chance of that going anywhere near getting in the hole. So I think I pressed the put button by accident there. So if we then maybe apply the same logic that we just applied to our rough shot just before. So we might say, okay, we want to aim it around about here. We'll add a third on again, so roughly that. Let's just see where that ends up. Again, way short. So I've had to think about this and had a few tries, and this seems to work quite well. When you end up on this lie, and again, you may never do it if you're more accurate than I am, but the situation may come up. What I've found is essentially doubling the distance seems to work fairly well. So my technique again will be very similar to what I did when I was chipping out of the rough. I will line it up as I would if it was a normal shot, and then I'll just double the distance. So I was going to aim that about 21, 22, so I'm aiming at 44, thereabouts. I think I've decided on pretty much dead on 44 there. So it's going to kick over to the left a little bit, so I haven't adjusted so far to the left. And although it doesn't go in, be fairly happy with that from the situation I was in, which was on that black rock. So there we have it. Hopefully there's some things for you to take away there. We've looked at various types of chip, uphill, downhill, kind of how to use the flop instead of the chip in some situations, and how to chip on various surfaces, including the road. So hopefully something there that will help you improve your scores at the end of the day. Starting to put some chips in where you previously haven't can be the difference between making the top place in your tour or making a podium in World Championship, you know, that sort of thing. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I'm really trying to push the subscribers recently. I'm trying to push towards 1,000. If we can get to 1,000 plus, it opens up quite a few doors with regards to getting sponsorship. What I'd like to do is maybe get a sponsor involved and offer up a prize or prizes for tournaments and get people invited, you know, and try and open things up that way. I think it'd be really useful. It'd be really nice if we could have some sort of competitive arena for Golfstar that maybe give you something to play for aside for from the in-game coins, you know, that sort of thing. So I think that'd be really good. And again, it's really dependent on getting more people involved, getting more people subscribed, and getting more people watching. So the views and the subscriptions are all important with that. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.